Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council special meeting of August the 22nd, 2023. The meeting has been called to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Here.
Councilmember Martin Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Salazar?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hamilton?
Here.
And Mayor Rico Medina?
Here. Next item is the public comments for items that are not on the agenda. We have one item which is a study session, and it is regarding committee, commissions, and boards and governance.
We have one in-person speaker, Malcolm Robinson.
As long as it's not on the topic.
Thank you. Apologize for my lack of decorum here. I'm heading to the pool. Water aerobics, I have to do it. My heart depends on it. And I do have comments about your special session. She'll give you them and read them into the record. But I would urge you to have San Bruno that's prepared for any and all emergencies. Okay?
No one said it's not. So, but thank you, and good luck on the swimming, and please drive safe.
Thanks.
Any other public comments?
There is no other public comment.
Thank you. We'll move on to the study session. And Ms. Robinson, you might want to hang on just for a quick moment. City Clerk, can you read?
Item 4A, conduct a study session and discuss City Council's strategic initiative on good governance of the city's commissions, boards, and committees.
Okay. What I had already planned to say is that this is a study session only. There is no action being taken. There are no motions being done. It is purely a staff coming back, which has been a few years of wait, and to give to the council some thoughts, get some opinions, and then it would go back, correct me, City Clerk, it would go back to the committee, commissions, and boards, and then it would come back to the City Council. So that is the process for tonight. There are no decisions. There are no actions. There are no motions. With that, staff.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I am Lisa Huerta, City Clerk, and I come before you to present good governance of commissions, boards, and committees. I apologize, I didn't realize that we were not sharing my screen. Okay. So the agenda here is objective, background, discussion, other ideas, next steps, and questions. Our objective is to hold this study session in order to begin the council's strategic initiative discussion involving the good governance of the city's commissions, boards, and commissions, also known as the CBCs. We would also like to receive council feedback on the subject. This slide displays the 9 CBCs as well as their established dates and member sizes. Some of these committees may have originated under a different name, but progressively throughout the years have transitioned, and this is the list of CBCs as we know them today. So good governance. The goal of good governance is to develop an effective and efficient structure in order to create transparency, openness, and effective collaboration in both decision and policy making. With that being said, we are requesting that council review a current governance structure and let us know, if necessary, how we can improve. We would also like to explore with council some ideas staff has come up with. CBCs are meant to support council on general as well as high-profile topics within our community. Members are volunteers who bring expertise as well as interest to the CBC. These CBCs should take the burden of taking a deeper dive on items to assist with the council's requests. In reviewing the CBCs, some things to consider would be, are we interested in merging some of the CBCs? Are there CBCs that maybe are, that we can maybe sunset? And also logistically speaking, should the council council meet with these CBCs on an annual basis, provide annual reports, should we develop work plans, modify the number of the members, or maybe adjust meeting schedules. Staff has expressed ideas in restructuring some of the CBCs, and the first we are going to discuss is BPAC and TSPC. BPAC's purpose is to provide resident insight into bike and pedestrian issues, whereas TSPC makes recommendations to council involving traffic safety, parking, and local traffic issues. BPAC and TSPC's main focus is public safety on public streets. So merging these two committees' functions in one committee could create a more efficient and integrated review of issues within the city. The next committees we would like to discuss are crime prevention and emergency preparedness. Combining these two committees would result in a unified effort to address crime prevention, emergency response, as well as safety. And it could also streamline administrative processes and empower the members. The next one is culture and arts. Culture and arts, they have expressed wanting to update the meeting schedule from meeting on a monthly basis to a quarterly basis in order to meet quorum as well as to present fruitful and items to the agenda. And the last one is Planning Commission and Architectural Review Committee. Staff ideas include reducing the committee members from the Planning Commission members from 7 to 5. And another idea is to combine the Planning Commission and ARC responsibilities and to review project types requiring and determining which ones require applications versus actual hearings. And this is where other ideas, we would like to hear from the council and hear any ideas that you may have on each of the CBCs. And our next steps will be, once we receive feedback from this study session, we intend to return to council and provide a follow-up. And we will also be soliciting feedback from the various CBCs. And that's it for my presentation. I'm here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, and I had paused Mr. Robinson not to make him late to his appointment, but wanting him to understand. And I think if there's any misnomer out there that this is an action tonight, it is not. It is a study session. These are staff looking at things and trying to look at it globally and holistically to see, are there changes or modifications or improvements or not, or no action at all. I can tell you from me, who served at an early age on Crime Prevention Committee, there used to be 15 members. And they were designated by geographic and business and age, and it has evolved and is transitioned to what it is today. So it never hurts to look at something and to review it, but by no means is this anything other than to get the information that we did from the city clerk and staff, and for us to have some discussion and give feedback to staff, and that's primarily it. So with that, I will open the floor for anyone who may have a question on the presentation. Vice Mayor.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for bringing this back to us. One thing that, just looking at the background about, just what the CBC's role is and all that, and it really seems to be, focused on, supporting us as council members and taking the deeper dive, as you said in the presentation. I don't really see any reference to a role as being kind of a front line with the community, because I spent many years on CBCs, and one of the primary things that we did was people who have a new issue. So I'll use TSPC as the example. That's where I spent most of my time. They've got speeding on their street, and they have no idea where to start. So they saw there was a meeting, so they showed up. Is that still supposed to be one of their functions, to be able to, give that information about how to start, what's the best way to get started, how to be really effective when you make your first request into the city, so that you don't lose time because you didn't give enough information, all that kind of stuff. That was the expertise that we would give to folks, and I just wanted to know if that is still supposed to be one of the roles of the CBCs.
So I do not know the answer to that, but I can find out and return with an answer. However, I do believe that maybe we just need to provide training, maybe with the new onboarding members, as well as some of the liaisons. So that's something that we can look into
Great.
as a whole.
Mr. Mayor, if I can
Yes,
echo a
please,
little
City
bit.
Manager.
Thank you. I do believe the CBCs are meant to be that interface, not between the council and the community, because we don't want to replace that, but as an additional level of interface, an additional level of engagement where, we can direct people with, whatever the concerns might be directly to that CBC, to be able to have that more in-depth conversation, whatever that might look like. Again, it's an extension of the council by a definition. I mean, that's really what they're here for, and that public engagement piece would still be very critical.
Got it. Great, thank you.
Other questions or comments from colleagues at this time? If I'm seeing and hearing none, let me see if there's any members of the public.
We have one in-person speaker, Janice Ludus.
Oh, is it off? I think he turned it off. Oh, here's Cody.
Test.
Great, thanks. Okay, now what was I going to say? Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Janet Ludus. I happen to be a member of the Emergency Preparedness Committee, and I realize that there is no action taken tonight. This is a study session. You're going to be talking about some of these ideas about merging Crime Prevention Committee and the Preparedness Committee. I'm just here tonight to give you my opinion. And right off, I think it's a terrible idea. The Crime Prevention Committee and the Preparedness Committee have two completely different functions, two completely different focuses. And to merge us both, I mean, are we going to spend half the meeting talking about preparedness, half about crime prevention? It just doesn't seem to be a good idea. And I think preparedness, if you've watched the news any time lately, you can see preparedness is a major, major thing, whether it's the hurricane or the, what else happened? The rain down in, all these things that are happening. Preparedness, the hurricane that hit LA, they were prepared. And the fires on Maui, I would like to have seen them have an SMC alert system of some sort. I think it would have done a lot of good there. So preparedness is so important that the County of San Mateo devoted an entire day earlier this month to Disaster Preparedness Day. And they wanted so many people to come there that they made free parking, free admission, free hot dogs. I mean, they consider preparedness to be that important. And I've been on this committee for some years, and I think preparedness is so important. I think we've gotten a little complacent because we haven't had any major disasters here lately. No earthquakes, no pipeline explosions. And maybe we think we don't need to talk about preparedness as much. That's not a good idea. So let me see. There are some Oh, I don't know if any of you on the city council and the staff, did you come to that disaster prep day? You would have found, if you came by our table, we were handing out tons and tons of flyers telling everybody the importance of being prepared, because you never know what's going to happen, never going to know what's coming up. And we even had handouts for the children, for them to study, for the family to get prepared, family to have joint meetings about what to do in case of an emergency. That has to continue. As far as this goes, meetings every other month, that wouldn't be a terrible idea. We could adjust the agenda to account for that. That wouldn't be a too bad of an idea. Anyway, if we merged with the forgot already. Crime Prevention Committee. They're very, very important, but they have a different focus than we do. And I would hate to see the effectiveness of the Preparedness Committee be decreased by this joint thing. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other speakers?
There are no other in-person speakers. We have one remote hand raised. Rich Wong. Rich Wong, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. My question is more for clarification. I heard the city manager speak to the committees then taking advice from the council on any initiatives and whatnot. Would there continue to be this liaison with the police department as far as with, like, for instance, the Crime Prevention Committee, where we can take matters of public safety directed from the police department and implement them within the committee?
Rich, if you go ahead and if there are any other additional questions or comments, and then we'll get them all collected for the.
Yeah, no, that's my only concern.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm going to address, so, Janet, thank you for your comments, and thank you for being there that Saturday, as you always are, with the county program. But again, as I made it clear, this is not about merging. This is staff is looking at it very globally, and it's not just that. There's other thoughts, whether it's in the Planning Commission, whether it's in TSPC. So it's not saying it's done. It's just saying they're giving us, for our minds to work, to give back information, no more, no less. So I just want to, again, reassure that. To Rich's question, it was about in regards to the liaisons. Can there be some additional response from staff on that, please?
I'm not sure that I have a great answer to that question, and it's more out of a lack of awareness of the role the liaison plays. I'm not sure if it's a liaison between the committee, the CBC, and the department, or liaison between the council and the CBC. And I'm going to apologize but we can certainly follow up. And you know, specifically with the police department, I don't see the chief here tonight. I think those are sort of, you know, kind of very special relationships, and we just want to make sure where they need to be preserved, to preserve them. But if it's not serving a particular need, then we probably need to look at that differently as well.
Through the chair?
Yes, go ahead.
If I could offer a little insight into there, just from my experience, and typically every committee has a staff liaison.
Oh.
And for this particular committee for crime, the PD assigns the staff liaison. And I believe preparedness has representatives from the fire department, as well as Red Cross, the school district, and a number of other entities. And PD.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the question is to my history, it was established to have a member of the council able to speak to the chair of the board, as an example, or committee, because maybe they weren't certain or things weren't gelling correctly, and it gave the avenue in which to say, hey, look, I've gone through this, I think this is the right way, but I'm still at a quandary, and so can you help me and or the committee understand or something to that. So I think that would be of help, maybe defining it further. I think it's also would set up expectations. Is there an expectation that they be there every meeting? Is it 1 or 2 meetings? And I think therefore council understands and the committee does, so they don't feel like, well, one shows up and then the other's not, but then, and I hear that, so I don't want it to be a, who has more meetings under their person. I do want to say, for the record, we were just handed Malcolm, which he had his comments, and I appreciate that. And I think sometimes we have to get into things, so I'm just going to read a bullet point here. Instead, this administration created another committee, the Disaster Committee, with no San Bruno citizens on board. A meeting was scheduled for April 2022. There was no record of this committee ever met, no minutes, no actions taken. So I have to ask, does San Bruno have preparedness in mind? So once again, a disaster committee is required by the state of California. It's not by an administration, it's a law. And it's abiding by that. It was Zoomed, it was agendized. So I just want, I bring that up because it just kind of caught my eye. So again, this is no more than a conversation. Let's remember that. Everyone's here trying to do the right thing. The volunteers, as someone who has served on a community commission board for many years as well, it's just a matter to have a discussion. And I think sometimes out of discussion brings forward maybe different thoughts, ideas, and by it going from here back to staff to the committee commissions and boards themselves, they have the opportunity to give their feedback with their staff liaison. So I think that's the right form in which the process has been established. And it has been a topic that we have been waiting for. So with that, other comments from members of the council, questions or otherwise? If not, then I will, sorry. Councilman Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the effort, the response from the council for the ability to talk about this. And hearing that staff has some recommendations. I also understand, and it's very, very clear, tonight's a discussion. And to see, what I'm hoping is, how do we work better together? I can tell you from experience that the council liaison was a really odd thing for me in my going on 8 years of being on the council. What I was told when I first got on the council was, you're the liaison for X or Y. And it's like, okay, so what do I do? And I was told, well, go to one of the meetings early in the year, introduce yourself, and that's all you need to do. And I found that like, okay, that's what we're supposed to do. So I went, and I think it was at crime prevention, and it was like, there were some really interesting conversations there. And I felt, you know what, I would like to hear more about these meetings and the other ones that I was assigned to. And I started going to them because we don't get that interaction with those boards, commissions, and committees no other way than perhaps once a year when we would get the report on what they did. So I'm interested in defining what the liaison should be doing and how we should be working together and putting together goals of, okay, the committee wants to do this. What does the council think about that? Because we don't want a commission going to the left and the council's here on the right, and then we get the yearly report and it's like, okay, now what? There is a very dedicated group of people who serve on these boards, commissions, and committees. I definitely want to hear from them, from all of them. I have heard over the years from a number of people that have served on these committees, and more often than not, it's more of, I don't feel like we're doing enough. I'm not really sure what we're allowed to do. whether it's on the TSPC of how can we get something agendized when somebody comes to their meetings and asks for something. And then for a while there, we had something called the matrix. And the matrix was a running sheet of what the different things that were brought forward from the public. And then it went away. And I think Vice Mayor Hamilton probably could talk more about that because I believe he served on that committee for 12 years. And so I've been hearing from members of the TSPC of they want to be able to agendize something. I've heard from culture and arts individuals where I'm not thinking about staying on anymore because I feel I'm not being heard. So in order to really hear from everyone, I think we need to go through an iteration of seeing what these boards and commissions think. And I'm also interested in my colleagues because we have to agree on really what's the best method to work together. So I think we'll have a couple more meetings. I understand perhaps staff's interest that of combining BPAC and TSPC. That makes the most sense to me. It's about keeping our pedestrians and those driving in our streets or walking our sidewalks. What's the best way to protect our residents? And how should they communicate together and deal with issues that come up that they're encountering either on the street or when a new development or change is proposed? And getting one full message from one body, I think would be very beneficial. I didn't really understand until watching the presentation and talking to our city manager of why does San Bruno have a planning commission and then a architectural review committee. It seems like it should be one body, and it's kind of the subset. And so how do we do things more effectively? And hearing from our committee members, board members, commissioners, I think that's really important. So I think we still need to do that step, and I'm definitely interested in hearing from my colleagues and their views on this. So thank you.
Member Salazar? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have mixed feelings on some of the recommendations that were made. Some of them I can see the logic to, others not so much. Regarding crime and preparedness, I know that many, many years ago when I was on the crime committee, I also served as a liaison to preparedness, and so I got to attend all the meetings. And we had discussions back then about combining. And one of the concerns I know we had back then was just in recruiting enough volunteers for both committees that were engaged and willing to participate, and sharing those resources across the two bodies seemed to make sense at the time. But on the flip side, I understand that we don't want to water down the intent of any committee, and sometimes one will be full speed ahead and the other one won't, and they do have very specific things. On crime, our big thing when I was there was in starting the National Night Out citywide, and in setting up the neighborhood watch programs, and those are still two programs that are very active on the crime side, and also on the emergency preparedness side. I know CERT is a big thing, and getting that awareness out there. I've gone through CERT training myself and definitely support that mission that they have. And so, I do share the concern that in combining those two bodies, some of that sense of purpose could potentially be watered down, because there are people that are very, very interested in working on one thing but not necessarily the other things, and then depending on who remains on the body. And then also, overall, one concern I have is if we move to merge any two bodies, how do we go about deciding who remains? And, that could have a profound impact on, how successful the remaining committee is. I understand also that there is a lot of commitment from staff on supporting these, so I think looking at the frequency of meetings is definitely something we can focus on and try to make sure that we're not meeting any more often than we need to, and that every committee will probably be different and will have different requirements, and so we should look individually at what their work tasks are and what they're doing. Regarding BPAC and traffic, having attended both meetings, it seems to me that on the traffic side, there is a lot of sort of technical knowledge that's required there, and they're working directly with the PD and the city engineer on very specific things that are regulated both by law and practical things, and where do stop signs go and what should speed limits be, versus what's happening on the bicycle committee, which is really geared toward creating programs that promote those things. And they are a little bit more hands-on in the community in terms of they're supporting Bike to Work Day, and they're supporting bike rodeos and education at the schools. And so they definitely have, in my mind, very different purposes, and probably the people that I would consider appointing to either of those bodies, they probably wouldn't be the same people. And I would be very concerned that we would get adequate representation on the traffic side, because they do have a mission that they need to accomplish in vetting things that will eventually come to the council, versus supporting those programs directly in the community. So I'd be concerned. One potential way to alleviate that would be that we would have appointees that are specifically from a subset of the community, meaning we would appoint one bike advocate to traffic, a pedestrian advocate, something to that line. But then we would still need somewhere on their agenda, which is sort of unscripted and not, the meeting's not called to discuss the four-way stop at the intersection of X, Y, and Z. There would have to be something there that would allow for those other types of programs that are not coming to us as a change to the municipal code. I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
So, I asked some questions earlier, but I didn't make any comments. So I have all kinds of comments. I'm just going to go in order through the presentation regarding the various CBCs. So starting with BPAC and TSPC, when I joined the TSPC, and I believe it's still architected that way, that the BPAC was actually a subcommittee of the TSPC, and we actually had a joint member, somebody who served on both simultaneously, and she would give a report out of the BPAC meeting at the TSPC meeting, and kept us in up to date on their activities. When that person retired, there were no takers for someone who wanted to wear the two hats. And to my knowledge, they've never found anybody who's wanted to wear the two hats throughout all of the interviewing and all of the applications that we've gotten. I don't even think we ask for it anymore. And I also just discovered tonight, because I didn't realize that the BPAC was only formed in 2002. So that one person was probably the only person to ever serve in both roles. I found it to be very, very valuable when we were there, but it sounds like that was something that was just unique. I absolutely agree with Councilmember Salazar. Those two committees have a different focus and have different members and different audiences who come to them. It's not unfair to say that on some issues there are the needs of bicyclists and there are the needs of drivers, and sometimes those needs are directly at odds. And the BPAC would be, historically has been made up of, bike advocates, I think is the term you used, many of those, and and folks who are advocating for pedestrians. And while I agree that there's certainly overlap, when you're designing an intersection, you need to make sure that the needs of everyone are being addressed. I worry that combining the two committees would water down the impact of one of the groups, of either the folks advocating for bikes and pedestrians or the folks advocating for drivers. And I have a feeling it would be the bikes and pedestrians who would take the hit there. So, and I wouldn't want that at all. So. Obviously we're just talking about it. We're not taking any action. I would need to be convinced on combining BPAC and TSPC. Moving on, I do also think that crime prevention and emergency preparedness are two really different things. These are two really important committees and are actually, very well attended, very active, that do a lot in our community. And I don't necessarily think that we would get a lot out of combining those. If there are topics that come up that are a crossover between the two things, I don't think we should ever rule out a joint meeting between subcommittees if there was a particular topic as a special event or whatever. I think we need to be creative. As if such a topic would arise. That's just my opinion on that one. For culture and arts, it completely makes sense to update the meeting schedule. They often don't have enough items, and they have a difficulty getting to a quorum. So if they're suggesting that moving from monthly to quarterly would be best, then I would have no reason to contradict that. Planning Commission and the Architectural Review Committee. I was on the Planning Commission just before joining the council. For those who aren't aware, the ARC is not a separate body. The members of the Planning Commission volunteer to sit on the next ARC meeting that's being scheduled. And that was something that would happen every month when the Planning Commission would meet. One of the things we would do is recruit members who's available on this date to do the ARC. My question would be if the ARC were eliminated, this would be one of those cases where if we eliminate it, we're not putting anybody out on the street because they all already have jobs on the Planning Commission. But would that mean that the meeting requirements would be different? So in other words, I know that there's state laws for how many meetings you can have for a particular development. Newer laws that have been put into effect that you can't, so the cities can't drag out a development they may not like by just having endless meetings. Right now, if a particular project needs to go before the Architectural Review Committee, that counts as a meeting, and then that has to go to the Planning Commission. Would this mean that by combining these, we are eliminating a meeting, or would it? Because I was also thinking that maybe it would come before the Planning Commission in its role as to review architecture, and then go away, and then come back again for action as the Planning Commission.
Hold on. I'd like to have the Vice Mayor conclude his comments first.
I'm actually, if it's okay with you, because I'm finding talking about all of them together.
Well, that's why I want you to finish.
Yeah, but okay, but I have. Well, I guess I don't have more after that. Okay, so all right, I'm scrolling and there isn't any more. So yeah, okay, so I can stop there. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to don't want them to train thought. Okay, everybody's a little anxious. It's okay. Hey, everybody get comfortable. We're going to be here into a 7 o'clock meeting. So, Assistant City Manager, what would you like?
Well, I can tell you that Director Gilly has thought a lot about this, so I think it would just be nice for him to answer that question, and then maybe while he's up here, any other questions about that particular topic, just because a large part of the staff report did propose some changes to that, so that would be nice to get maybe questions on that in case we have any more for him.
Okay, great. Councilman Medina, would there be, so, make note. No, don't go anywhere. Do you have anything from Julie? Okay. Michael? Sandy, at this time? So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
on the Planning Commission and the architectural review?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In my opinion, I think the Planning Commission should stay because they have a different role in reviewing our projects. And unlike the Arts Commission, in my opinion, we should combine the Arts and the Senior Committee, the Senior Advisory Committee. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Director, you have the vice mayors, and I was going to ask, and I just don't recall off the top of my head, is it a current municipal code that we have an ARC review? Please ask the vice mayors is first, and then just.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so first question was if the PC reabsorbed all the responsibilities of the ARC, would that change the number of meetings and scheduling? It will vary. There will be certain projects where one application could go to one meeting, whereas it currently needs two. Based on the way our municipal code is written, there are certain projects that would still go to two meetings. It would just be the PC for an early look and then a PC for a final action. And the biggest issue with the meetings in staff's view is there would be more flexibility on scheduling. Whether it's a design review item, it could go to one of two meetings in a month, or a use permit could go to one of two meetings in a month, whereas right now there's only one meeting for architectural review and one meeting for planning items. And then because I answered that one, I don't remember.
Well,
Councilmember
the
Salazar.
vice mayor's was much better, probably.
Yeah.
I have a question. No, mine was, is there, maybe two-part, is the ARC meeting, is that a requirement that's currently in the municipal code? Yes or no? And then two, is there a chance that it goes to an ARC committee review, and again, you ask for volunteers, and then when this comes back up, if it has to go back, that there could be two different or three different individuals than the original time, which means now you're getting a bunch of information and crossing over to too many people?
So the answer to both questions is yes. There is something in the municipal code that calls for the ARC that can be amended by council. And there have been circumstances where a project will go to ARC more than once, and they'll have a different three members at one ARC meeting than at another. There's also the issue where a meeting will go to ARC, and then it will go to the Planning Commission, and the planning commissioners who were not at that ARC have views on the design that are brought up, and then that can be a little frustrating to an applicant who might believe that they're all done with the design review part, but the Planning Commission actually still has some authority over that. So this potential change is viewed as something that could clean up a lot of potential misunderstandings or improve with scheduling.
Okay, and I do find also and I think you alluded to it, it could be once a month or what have you, and so therefore an applicant is waiting, a project is waiting, waiting equals cost, and at times frustration. So I can see that to be explored. I apologize, was there any other questions that you took away from us that you need to respond to or that I wasn't? No, I think we're good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So what I would, some of my thoughts are, I know where they're going back to the committee, commission, and board, so I want to hear from them before I make a determination. The ARC and Planning Commission to me are kind of there, but I want to hear from those folks that are in the seats, from them specifically, and that will go back and then it'll come back to us. I think when we start talking about the liaison and the uniqueness, I think what really needs to be really defined clearly is I remember going to one meeting, I think it was TSPC, and there was 3 of us there. Staff didn't know what to do. I remember getting pulled out of the room and being asked, can we even have the meeting go with 3 of you in the room? So we as council have to understand that we appoint them and have faith and confidence in our staff and in the volunteers that we have appointed to get information and try to make good recommendations that come back to the council. I also know, I think it needs to be defined, to me, as a council member, my role is not to sit there and guide them. It is to have guidance from them. And I think it's very different. I've learned as I've gotten older too, you can say something and you might think it was just you saying, yeah, that sounds good to me. Well, it comes back that X member says they want this, and that's happened. So I think we just need to have it really clearly defined. We don't need policy procedures, just the understanding of how our role can best serve them. And I know it's happened a couple of times to me where I was pulled aside by the chair and saying, hey, I'm not sure what to do, whether it's with the manager, whether it's with staff or a combination, and they just didn't know where else to turn. And so that, to me, is for us to be there to try to assist and maybe be in between to say, okay, maybe there was a misunderstanding and how do we get to the end result. But I also think it is important for us to set some kind of thoughts through our strategic initiatives of what are we looking for. Sometimes maybe that is something that's important. And I go back to when we had 15 members on crime prevention. I mean, we ran a poster contest, but for the most part, the 15 members did it. We had 1 staff person or 2 that helped out during that. But with those numbers, you were able to accomplish a lot more. Not saying we have to go back to those days. I'm sure teachers would not want more poster contests. But it also is a matter of looking to staff's opportunity and time. I want to be mindful of that. I think if we have things streamlined and solidified, that maybe we get more results. Too many times, somebody in the police department serves on 2 or 3. So really, how will that be? So I think as you look at that, I think we want to look at what makes sense and efficiency. And if it doesn't need to meet every month, then maybe it doesn't need to meet every month. That's okay. Let's be realistic. But let's set realistic expectations and goals so that people can achieve it. People feel that their time and their love and dedication to this community are being felt and that they can make a difference. And I think that's the reason I have been on them for so long, is because I saw I made a difference for the community. And so that's what we want to make sure it is truly about. And it is really entrusting and having faith in those folks in this community that have a lot of talent to give. So are there any other final comments or questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
So I actually did forget a question, and I apologize, and I hope it doesn't mean that Peter has to come back to the mic. But there was a recommendation on reducing the Planning Commission to 5 members, but I'm not clear on why. Why? What? Like, is there? Why was that?
I can
How would that help?
Ms. Julie, and I may have a side comment to that. And if you feel you wish to get it. There was some comment about the space and seating in a new facility. And to me, I'm sure with the city of San Bruno, we can make things work and make things happen. It's my opinion. The other thing, too, is if we remember when we had personnel board, for example, and it was kind of determined that it was going to no longer exist to a point. It started being when somebody would depart, resign, or whatever, for whatever reason, they were not filled again. So it kind of was through attrition. It wasn't from somebody saying, thank you, but no thank you. But you can do it from there, but am I correct? Or, oh, he's going to get up, so I misspoke a little.
Mr. Mayor, just want to speak to the mic so
That's okay.
it can be recorded.
Thank you.
Fully agree with how you described it. There is a logistical benefit. Planning Commission is one of the meetings that has more authority than some of the other boards. Thus, we want to make sure they are all set, whatever facility we have set up for all the technology and such. It would simply be easier to have it be the same size. That doesn't mean it has to be. And then if council did propose this, then, the suggestion of waiting until members are termed off would be what we would recommend as well. Roughly half of the Planning Commission has a term end at the end of the fall of 2024. The other half is the fall of 2025. If a change were made in the numbers, the idea would be to do it gradually.
And that's, thank you, that's considering that if it goes to the new facility, it doesn't mean they still can't meet here for logistics sake for the 7. Or if we want, we can always make 7 council members, and then it would be even.
So
I'm not looking for a comment on that.
Thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, the reason that I asked the why, and I appreciate that. So, I was, honestly, I was kind of hoping that there was some kind of legal or other reasons. If it's logistical, I think because the Planning Commission, you're absolutely correct. It has a lot more responsibility, legally and such to the other committees. I think having it be at 7 members makes sure that powerful committee can get the most representation from the community. That's just my opinion there. And then my very last comment, I promise, is about the whole process. When we talk about going back to the commissions, the CBCs to get their opinions, I absolutely think that is critical. I would hope that includes directly asking, what do you think the council liaison to your committee should be doing? And how can a council liaison serve you the best? I felt the same awkwardness that Councilmember Medina described. I've heard both. You really need to be there to show that you're there and part of it. And I've also heard, we don't want you looking over our shoulder because it feels like we can't, because they're supposed to be autonomous and they're supposed to be, So I've heard both, and both things can even be true depending on what the topic of the day is. So I really want to know what they think about it, and I'm wondering if the idea here is to agendize this topic on each of their agendas so that they can have a discussion amongst themselves about what to send back to us, so that they can have a public discussion.
I was going to say they have to. If it's unagendized, they're not going to be.
Well, it's like I suppose we could have, they could have sent out a survey to all the individual members or something. I just didn't know what that was going to look like.
City manager, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of ideas, and if I can, I think appearing before the CBCs in person and sort of asking them is one thing. But it's sort of, if you think about it, though, it's a hard question to ask, right? Should you exist anymore? You're going to get the answer of yes, we should. Right. More rather than is there another way of sort of probing the question in a way that gets at how can you be more, if you're going to continue, how do we make you more effective and more successful? If I can keep going for a moment, just because in front of the microphone. A couple of things you guys, and this has been a good conversation, and I do very much appreciate it. I know it's hard to look volunteers in the eyes and say, hey, we don't need your service anymore. And that's not what staff is ever recommending. That is not the ask here. And I want to be clear, there's no recommendations. Somebody used the word recommendations. Lupita and I were very clear that these were just ideas, just ideas. And we want your ideas as well. And we definitely want to hear back from you. I think a couple of observations, if I can. I've had a lot of years experience working with CBCs and councils. And there were some other questions we posed to you as well, and if I can sort of nudge you guys in that direction right now, because I think we have a little bit more time, are things like, how do you guys as council engage with the CBCs? Do they come to, do you hold a joint meeting with them once a year? Why don't you sit down with the PC once a year and have a joint meeting? Why don't you sit down with the BPAC and have a joint meeting? So that there is that check-in with each other to say, yep, you guys are on the right track, you're doing great work. That would be number one. I think number two, the word liaison was used differently so far tonight, and because I think Councilmember Salazar helped me understand what one of the terms meant. So there's a staff person assigned to the CBCs, right? That's the staffing of it. Then the liaisons, just by my experience, tends to be council liaisons. So that's the clarity. I think the staff role really is to help the committees, the CBCs, set some, I don't want to say boundaries, but sort of the framework for how they move forward, how they keep, moving along. One of the things that's a constant struggle with CBCs and staff is, are they taking direction from staff? And the answer is mostly no. Remember, they are advisory to the council, and not to be, overly state the obvious, but staff works for me, so the direction comes from me. So it's one of these loops that needs to go this way rather than the direct loop of, hey, staff, you go out and do this thing, and that's really not what it shouldn't be what the role is, unless the council explicitly wants that. And that's, I think, a conversation you all need to have with yourselves. But again, the way it's set up right now is the CBCs shouldn't be giving direction to staff directly, telling them to go out and do the thing, whatever it might be. Sorry, one more item. And then the idea of, I'll call it the work plan. How do they help you accomplish the work you guys want to get done? We do a lot of it, of course, as staff, but there's also a role for the CBCs to help sort of do the heavy lift, and that was a term I used in the staff report. How do we help them help you? And making sure they're not just doing something over here that's not consistent with the council's efforts. The emergency preparedness is, of course, very important, and no one would ever say that's not a very critical subject matter for us. The idea of CERT training and whatnot, of course, we will continue to invest in that. And if that's a council goal, then, not a goal, a council directive, then of course, we're going to just keep going that direction. But those things stated make it more evident. And my last comment is some of the, I'll call it the purpose statements or the mission statements of the CBCs. Are they as clear as they could be? Do the CBCs understand their roles clearly? How can we help them feel more effective and feel more valued? And I think that's what we're trying to get at here through this conversation as well. So again, it's not about jumping to the end game and saying, let's eliminate. That really is sort of just an idea over here. It's how do we make them work best for you? And how can we support them to be successful? So I hope that helps with the sort of the next round of this conversation.
Yeah, it does. And I think one thing that you also were asking as far as kind of like, do you do a joint meeting? Do you do an evening where we get together and the chairs do their reports and at that time we then have some kind of a thank you or for their involvement and participation, and we do it collectively. It may also be an idea to have everybody know what each other are doing and what they're working on. And maybe, oh, I hadn't thought of that, or I didn't know that, or have you ever thought of this? Even though I'm somewhere else, but what I've done in my living, this has really been effective, or in another community I have. So I kind of like that. I believe I'd like to have us together to say thank you, and maybe honor those that have chosen not to continue to serve. But I think those are important things for everybody giving up their time. So I could see maybe that time being spent hearing from those presentations from the bodies, possibly. That's just a thought. Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you. So some additional thoughts along those lines. So it's been a while since we did it, but we did have annual reports from every committee that used to come to the council, and so we did get briefed on all of their accomplishments for their year and their goals for the coming year. So I think that is a good forum for keeping the entire council informed. Having been a liaison, a council liaison to, I think, pretty much every committee and commission, I always found it valuable as a council person to participate, see how the dynamics of the groups work, and having been a member, sort of understanding, their processes and their thoughts, it kind of helped close that gap for me. So I thought it was interesting, but as far as being a necessary position, I don't know that I ever provided a lot of benefit to them other than letting them know that they were supported by either a former colleague and now council member or somebody who was, at the level of being able to appoint them and provide direction to them. I think the only occasion when I was sort of approached officially was when a member of one of those committees felt that staff was either not listening to them or something was not going on track, and they felt that they weren't getting the response they needed from staff. They would ask me to intervene, and of course, I would take it to the city manager and raise the concern and see if it could be addressed somehow. But aside from that, I don't think there was any direct benefit. When I attended the meetings, I would, just let them know I was there to listen, not to offer direction or anything else other than, just to be like a member of the audience. So if that official liaison role were eliminated, and I don't think we've assigned any in the past couple of years, I don't think anything would be lost.
And I forgot, thank you, Councilmember. You would also ask the question as far as the committee members and direction or not direction to staff. I believe that the staff liaisons are there to safeguard, to assist and safeguard, is how I look at it. For a member to say, I want to put X on the agenda, and it's not really within the purview of that environment, then I think that's a concern. In some of the bodies, it's brought forward, Planning Commission, TSPC. The staff usually brings topics forward. Culture and Arts has been kind of, what are you thinking? What do you want to do? Let's be creative. So maybe we do need to have that somewhat understood. For me personally, it would not be at all that the committee, commission, and boards, and I've been a long time to those, would direct staff on what they must do, how they enforce things, how they do things, or what you must put on the agenda, or it has to have it. I think it's a collaborative effort, and staff also has the professional and background in what they do for the city that I think we need to, the committee, commissions, and boards need to respect. Anyway, anything else from other colleagues at this time? Doesn't mean it's not coming back, as you know. Okay. With that, if there be city managers or anything else that you can think of at this time that you'd like to ask further.
I don't believe so for the moment. What I think I am hearing is that, and if I can jump to next steps really quickly, if that's what you're asking,
Please.
is I think we're hearing feedback from the councils about the idea of mergers is not necessarily, you need a lot more information if indeed we want to move forward. And maybe we haven't made a case yet. And I'm not sure we would necessarily invest a lot more time in the idea of the mergers. What we might just do is really set up the clarity then and what the roles are and get those those purpose statements out there. I think we will go back to the CBCs and talk to them directly. I do think there's value in surveying the CBCs as well, because sometimes in a public meeting, maybe they're not comfortable saying something that might be more comfortable saying, through a survey process. I would be curious about former CBC members, and is there value in surveying them? Because they have no stake, right? They have nothing to lose other than, hey, gosh, and I think some of you alluded to this, I really wish we had more things to do or more meat or more whatever, so that they felt their time was well invested. And the converse could obviously be true, is they felt incredibly valued and incredibly appreciated for the work they did. I'm loath to ask this next question, but I have to because it's the right thing to do, is do we have the right number of CBCs? In other words, is there something missing? I'll take silence as a good thing. We'll leave it alone for the moment, but noodle on that.
And if there's a thought that comes up,
Right.
they can always, in one-on-ones or email. I was going to say, because you said maybe not the merger, for me personally, I could see the Planning Commission and the ARC be considered on that differently. That might be something to look at for me. I know that's just me. Okay. And I think it is important too on the roles, because what I don't want, what I don't think is effective is a member, whoever they are, go to staff, don't like the answer, go to the manager's office, go to a council member, and now we're doing this thing, and I don't know what the end result is, but I just know it's not good use of staff time or maybe a efficiency. If there's nothing else, go ahead, Councilmember.
Sure.
Please.
So regarding the number of planning commissioners, In general, I do agree with the Vice Mayor that having more diversity on that body is probably important, but I know that there have been long periods of time when we've operated with vacancies on that plant, on the commission. We don't always have a lot of applicants. So if maybe we could get some data back on, whether or not, is it really necessary? What are other cities doing? How many times have we had trouble reaching quorum? I don't know that that's been an issue, but, for the periods of time that we had, open seats, was it an issue? Were any meetings delayed because of that? And in general, I agree with reintegrating the ARC portion of it because it does seem redundant. I've seen some of the meetings where there's awkward silence when they ask for volunteers for it. And so if that could be brought back in and make things more efficient, I would definitely support that.
Good.
Well, again, thank you, Peter. Thank you. Appreciate it. With that, we're going to adjourn this meeting, and the next regular city council meeting will be right here today at 7 p.m. This portion and the special meeting is now adjourned.